Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's topic of the week. My name is Alec, and in front of me we have Joshua Cheatham in the flesh. Uh, so for this week's topic of the week, we're going to be discussing. This one's a hypothetical episode, just like our USMCA as a economic union episode. We believe that people should be aware of what ifs in the international community and what we can and can't do. So for this one, it's an interesting one. We have the possibility of a trilateral economic partnership between the US, Middle East, and China. So, like I said, it's a hypothetical episode, and we understand that tensions today are too high amongst China and the United States to see this happening right now, but it's right now. So
Money talk.
money talks. And this could be something that could be explored later in the future where we have a trilateral agreement. But as Josh said, money talks, and money is a deciding factor in a lot of politics and international relations.
Yeah.
So a trilateral economic partnership between the US, Middle Eastern countries, and China could be a massive deal for the international community, with innovations and industrial development skyrocketing. But for this to happen, the US, Middle East, and China all have to see eye to eye, which right now is impossible, but not possible, not impossible as time progresses.
Yeah.
So, this is because the international community has one goal, is to industrialize and develop. So regardless of whatever geopolitics are out there, everyone's goal is the same: develop and compete with each other economically. Because competition is key, and
It's important.
competition is key. Partnerships are key to economic development. So, yeah.
Yeah, so China has been having a growing influence in the Middle East since around 2004 when they created their first free trade agreement with the GCC, which is the Gulf Cooperation, or Gulf, I wrote it down, Gulf Cooperation Council. So at that time they were looking to diversify their oil, and become not so oil dependent as in their economies through Chinese investment. And so this was the first between those countries. So this includes Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait. Uh, I guess I didn't miss anybody. Perfect. So those are the countries there that are involved in the GCC, and they're all OPEC nations as well. And so China and Saudi Arabia have been collaborating for a very long time. Through 2019, they have been building a new ballistic missile. I forget what it's called, but they've been building a new ballistic missile for military partnerships. They also sell air defense systems to the Saudis and drones to the United Arab Emirates. Um, just going over history of like China and relations with Middle East. Recent negotiations between Iran and Saudi Arabia to reestablish diplomatic ties was brokered by the Chinese. They've been working with Turkey to create new 5G technologies and new energy technologies. China has built infrastructure in both Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman, which include telecommunications technology and energy. And they have also been heavily involved in Egypt in rebuilding their infrastructure and financial systems because they have just been, obviously very, very poor financial systems in recent years as they've gotten their 15.7 billion from the World Bank. And lastly, they've been heavily rebuilding Iraq and Syria since the war in Iraq and the Syrian um, attacks from their government on their people. So they're very heavily involved within the Middle East as of
Oh yeah,
current. And the United States, of course, since 2001, has been heavily involved, but in a different way,
militarily.
militarily. Yes. So that is why I think in the United States losing out. There's a really good article in the Atlantic is saying how can America try to fix its relationship? And one of the key words that I highlighted was aggressive diplomacy. I think that's a very interesting word because it kind of it's not like military, but it's like forcible, like what's the word?
Forceful.
Forceful diplomacy, where they're basically telling you, giving you ultimatums, saying like, we can give you this, but you got to give us that. We can give you this, but you got to give us that.
I think that's negotiating. I don't think that's more ultimatums. I think
True.
ultimatums are like, if you don't do this our way, then this X, Y, and Z will happen. I think that's just, if they labeled that as forced diplomacy, then I think that's a little bit too extreme. I think that's just normal negotiating. I'll take this for this type stuff. But yes, the United States still has a militaristic approach in the Middle East, and China was like, all right, well, they're so busy with all that. We're going to take a different approach, and they're the ones that are negotiating conflict resolutions in the Middle East,
Oh
and
yeah,
people are going to China for that. But at the end of the day, the Middle East are still they're still looking to the United States for partnerships because of
temporary.
how tied up we are militaristically. Our military bases there, we're offering them protection, which is the
Yeah.
first thing on the table which the Middle East wants is protection. They want protection from outside conflicts, and they also want protection from internal conflicts. They
Mhm.
want protection of their economic prosperities and their goals. You see the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they're developing economically and they want to protect that. For their
Absolutely.
protection, where do they go? The United States, not China. They may go to China for dispute resolutions because they may be a better mediator and facilitator than the United States. But at the end of the day, the Middle East do come to us first before they do go to the Chinese. That's if we push them away and we're like, we can't handle this right now,
Yeah.
which has happened before, and we've ignored some situations, like the what was it? The resolution, not the resolution, the where the Chinese mediated talks between.
Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why that should have been a U.S.
Should have been. Oh, it was at first, but then nothing was getting done because there's a clear bias. We're in favor of Saudi Arabia and not in Iran. But on the other side of things, China, who is friendly with both of them, economically and politically, especially with Iran. But economically, Saudi Arabia was just invited to join the STC, the Shanghai Cooperation Council. And so, and then they don't participate, have full votes, they're observer state. But the point is that they gave the Chinese basically told them like we can give you this, we can give the Iranians this, but establish ties. We can help mediate these ties, establish economic relationships with each other, with people like us and others in Eastern Asia and around the world. The Chinese perfectly did it. And so one of the things that China tends to ignore is politics when they are economically working with a country.
Yes.
The one thing the United States is doing the opposite of is we look at politics. We look at how they run their government and we say, well, we're not going to work with people who are abusing human rights. And I'm totally with that. I understand that. The Saudis, though, not really abusing human rights. It's just their culture. I think when we look at that as how they treat women as abusing human rights, but that's just how they are culturally, and I really don't like to influence our culture on the rest of the world. I think that's what makes everyone unique. Now it's if they're like the Taliban and they're just not letting women go to school or letting women and they're like killing people, like that's different. But the Saudis aren't doing that. Women are allowed to go to school. Women are allowed to own their own companies, to start their own companies. They're allowed to work. And so it's just culture. And so I think one of the new things the United States needs to look into the future is kind of ignoring cultural differences and working with them in that sense. Because that's what the Chinese do. And the Chinese go a little bit extreme.
They completely look the other way.
Yeah,
They're
but
like, oh, well, we don't see that. We did not just see that happen, but
yes.
hey, like money,
Money, yeah, we'll give you a
money.
little
You know,
change.
here's what I think about this. I think the U.S. should, in a way, not change country's culture,
Absolutely.
but they should influence globalization, having that happen. Because regardless, when the world converges, sometimes our cultures can also converge,
Yeah.
and ideologies converge, cultures converge. When we're all trying to work towards one goal, automatically happens. So,
And
y-
America's the best example of that.
yep.
I mean, we're the most culturally diverse country in the world. And 99% of us get along just fine. I mean, we all walk down the streets and it's just we're just minding our own business. Despite what you hear on the news all the time, like that's the 1% of this country. I'll
Hmm.
give you maybe 5% at most. And so yeah, worlds are gonna collide. That's just natural when you start to globalize. But the one thing that I think the United States needs to move towards in the future, if they want to create this trilateral partnership in the future, this potential thing that we're hypothetically creating, is competition. We need to prove to the Saudis and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates that
All of the
we
Middle
can,
East.
all the Middle East, yeah, that we can build better infrastructure, provide better financial systems, provide better security. We already know we can do that,
Yep.
and provide a better political partnership with them. And then the Chinese might come to us and say, "Hey, Let's make a
We see
deal.
you're offering all this. Why don't we add to this as well? Because they're going to want a piece of the pie as well.
Actually,
If the U.S. dominates in all aspects, security, economically, politically, the Chinese have no choice but to find ways to work with us, and that's what they want. That's what not. It's not what they want, but it's the. Oh, that's what we need in order to get them to have that want. Is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Because the Chinese will not work with us, regardless.
yeah.
And this is why this partnership will not happen now. But if we can prove to the Middle East, as you were saying, that the U.S. has better options, I mean, just we can provide them a ton of examples with how their how a road initiative has failed in Africa,
Oh yeah,
and we don't want the Saudis, we don't want the Emiratis, we don't want any other Middle Eastern country to fall in this trap. So we should give them a warning and create an alternative option.
yes,
I think our first step is to create an alternative option to the BRI, which is Belt and Road Initiative. I'm
yeah,
going to say BRI for this episode. We should create our own.
yeah. I
Why
totally agree.
why not
So
have
strong.
it where we have our own initiative, combine it with the Chinese BRI, and now we have a full. I want to say a forced partnership, but really at the end of the day, both of us have the Americans and the Chinese have to sit down and say, okay, well, we got two different projects going on here. What
Yeah,
can we Here's what I'll take care of. Here's what the US can take care of. We have the Middle East in the conversation. They can supply the energy resources we need to
yeah,
make our stuff work. And now we have three big powerhouses of the international community.
yeah.
Eh,
I
That's
think the
that's
the one thing that America, I think, doesn't understand about the Chinese is that they don't hate the United States because we're the biggest economic power. They hate the United States because we just keep stepping on them and stepping on them and stepping on them, and they don't like that. And so if we just kind of, I'm not saying we got to stop stepping on their toes because we got to kind of force our influence a little bit and push our power, but we need to start like understanding that China's here to stay unless something drastic happens in the next 10, 20 years. China's not going anywhere.
hmm
They're going to be the second largest economy, if not the largest economy, in the next 20 years. It's going to happen. They have a 1.4 billion person population. If they keep rising people out of poverty, there's endless things they can do. And they figure out how to, if they have start having more children and figure out their aging population. Like, they're going to be here to stay. And I think making them as more of a friend or an acquaintance versus an enemy is where we need to do. And we need to drive that through respect. Because I think Xi Jinping respects the United States for what we do because we have so much influence and we respect the Chinese. But we're losing that respect because we keep stepping on their toes and they
And there
keep
should be
stepping
a
on ours.
fine line between competition and stepping on their toes.
Yeah,
We're stepping on their toes because of what's going on in Taiwan right now, and we're trying to put the pressure on them to hurt them so that they can back off of Taiwan. That's how this is happening.
yeah,
But there needs to be a fine line between economic economic competition to geopolitical competition.
yeah.
I think we're mixing the two, unfortunately, is
Yes,
what we're doing right
unfortunately.
now, which we shouldn't be doing this. Geopolitics and security are one thing, economics are another thing. We should be cooperating economically and not intertwining the two. That's my hot take.
And the other, it's a great point. The other point is that we could get them to back off of Taiwan if we create more economic partnerships with them because they're seeing that we're being more cooperative, but we're not. We keep sanctioning them. They keep sanctioning us. We keep raising tariffs. And for what reason? We're
They're
losing
still
so
doing the
much
same exact thing.
money. Yeah, they're going to keep doing the same thing. Maybe if we back off a little bit and kind of open up our trade with them, maybe they'll say, all right,
Even
I'll
that's
back off a little bit. And I think one of the first ways to do that, China has a free trade agreement with all the Middle East, the GCC zone.
mhm.
I think the United States needs to do that.
We should have been.
Create that
I think we
competition.
should have done that.
Yeah,
But whatever happens now is in the past. But I think our next step should definitely be, as you said,
yeah.
creating that.
Because if we create a free trade zone with the Middle East, with between the United States, that can give more faith that we're here to stay. Not just for security reasons, but for economic reasons and politically. We're here to stay. We're not going to leave them alone because after we pulled out of Afghanistan, man, the lack of faith that the Middle East had in the United States just dwindled
Yep.
very, very quickly. And that's not good. So that's a first step. And then I think the second step is involving Europe. Europe needs, we said this before, needs to start looking more outwards.
Yep.
And I think if their involvement in the Middle East grows, more economic partnership, more security alliances, maybe not even just alliances, just, like, hey, we're here if you need you. That can open up the Middle East even more to Western society and stop them because they're going Eastern. That's just how it is. They
Yep.
are, and they're going to Africa. So, yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to talk about is the dispute in the Middle East with wanting to use the yuan in certain trades.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
also another big driver of whether this partnership is going to work or not.
Yes.
Because the Middle East is like, okay, well, we want to use the yuan. The Chinese are offering this ability to work with them economically, and it's only fair we trade oil in the yuan. But this
Big problem.
this can and can't be a big problem. Let me just put it out there that the yuan is currently pegged to the dollar.
Yes.
That so whatever happens to the dollar is going to happen to the yuan.
Yeah.
The yuan is not yet ready for the global stage because of how its inability to be created easily without any barriers to trade because of the government is very influential in how the yuan is traded and used.
Low interest rates, loans everywhere.
Yep. So with the Middle East, as you said, going more eastern, this should have been a wake up call. The moment the Middle East said, "We want to use the yuan now," this should have been like something should have clicked in here in
Yeah.
in the mind, like a light bulb. Like, okay, we need to do something about it, and we need to do it quick. Because if hypothetically, let's say BRICS goes through, what's not to say the Middle Eastern countries are going to expand? Now the United States is out of the picture,
Yeah.
fully Eastern now. We need to be in there right now and discussing new trade deals for them to continue trading in the dollar to promote just maintaining partnerships with them. We can't lose the Middle East to BRICS. We
Absolutely.
should have a US, Middle East, and Chinese partnership, which can also include, let's say, hey, BRICS works out, add BRICS in there, add the EU in there. It'll be a good balance.
Yeah, and that's the perfect. I was just about to bring that up. I mean, the EU, like needs to get involved because okay, let's say if they're gonna start using the yuan as their trade. Obviously, it's pegged to the dollar and it's not ready to be used. There's not enough in circulation. But you want to know what there is enough in circulation? The euro. And so we can say, hey, you can start trading in euros and you can start trading in, obviously, you can trading in dollars. And these are two incredibly stable currencies. In fact, they're the two most stable currencies in the world, period. So you know you're going to get your value. You know it's not going to be lost. You know you're going to get paid. The yuan can't say the same in most places. You just can't because it's not stable. It's not. It's not backed by anything. There's not enough of it, and the Chinese economy is right now in gambles. Let's be honest. It's not doing so hot. And so that could be one way to help influence them from not going to the yuan is like, yeah, let's just trade in euros. Because I do one thing I do agree is I think it's time to start trading in countries' currencies with other countries instead of using the dollar predominantly. The dollar should still be the reserve currency. It should still be the most traded currency. But if they want to buy oil, let them buy it in euros. Who cares? Like, it's not going to end the world. Nothing's going to happen. It's only going to benefit Europe, which is benefit to the US and benefit to
So
everyone
you're
else.
saying whatever the destination country's currency is of a commodity or
From a
traded
commodity,
product.
besides oil, commodities. I think that could be in
I
oil should be in
yeah, I,
dollars, but everything else, who the heck cares?
that's
It's
fair.
not going to hurt anybody. It really isn't because the only thing that's pegged to the dollar that is a commodity is oil. So that has to be traded in dollars. But you're only doing the world a favor by first off lowering inflation if you're for those countries by them being able to trade in their own currency.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I didn't think of it like that
Yeah.
before. Yeah, you're right. Not everything has to be traded in one currency. I
No, it
think it'd be
doesn't.
beneficial for a destination's country currency too,
Mhm.
for it to be traded like that because now you're building
Exactly.
trust into that currency, and when you build trust into a currency, that's what increases its value.
It
That
increases.
that's what
Yeah,
that's what keeps value. That's what keeps the dollar where it is. The strength of a currency matters at the end of the day. Like trust.
yeah.
Like but when I say trust, a lot of things go into trust. Well, it's the what's being traded, who are the investors in that country, et cetera, et cetera. And you have when you add up all these factors of overall what is the economic development growth, and if it's good, you build trust, and that currency is strong. And I think Josh made a great point. What if like we look outwards as well? We look into like African countries and we can trade in their currency as well.
Oh my goodness, it would be
It'll
so
increase trust
huge.
in their currency,
Yeah,
and yeah,
it'll be so huge for African countries to develop if we can trade in their currency because all of a sudden now, if we buy their commodities from Africa and look at the Middle East too, if we buy their commodities from the Middle East and we give them their coins and their dollars, there's more in circulation for them, which means more investment, which means you can hire more workers, less poverty, infrastructure goes up, financial systems become stronger. And that is so important to economies around the world. With financial services, um, and infrastructure, because if they don't have the correct infrastructure, people are going to be poor and they're not going to have good housing. And if they don't have financial services, I mean, almost two-thirds of the world can't bank. They don't have access to a
right.
bank account or banks.
Which raises my first question then: if this trilateral agreement were to go, under which currency should be the one that should be traded when if there's a trilateral agreement? Hard question.
That's a hard question.
Because what I was thinking was, okay, now we have all these countries combined. Whose currency are we going to trade? I was thinking where we have a period in which every year we change the currency it's traded in 3 times a year. So we'll have the first third be in dollars, the second third be in Chinese yuan, and the third piece, which is towards the end of the 4 months after, would be in whatever currency Middle Eastern countries choose. I
Or,
think it's a fair balance between having these currencies in circulation around the world.
yeah,
Besides oil, which is currently pegged to the dollar anyways, and the world trades in dollars for
yeah,
oil anyways. But everything else other than that, I think there should be like a 4 month period in which it
each person
rotates.
gets it. Yeah, that's a good idea. But it also you can do commodities, like what certain commodities can be traded in certain.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so
that
like
also works
whatever
too.
whatever the Saudis are selling to you as a commodity that's not oil, be in what's the Saudi currency? The Riyadh,
Real.
the Riyal, and then whatever being traded to them from China to be in the yuan, and then whatever is being traded from the United States to those countries is in the dollar. Besides oil, well, it has to be
So yeah,
in the dollar. So that could be a good thing to do in this trilateral partnership because then it shows real partnership. Because the United States goes in there and just says, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna trade, but everything's gotta be in the dollar." Automatically, the United States is. It's not that they're winning, but like they have the advantage. It seems like they have the advantage, and the Chinese don't want that. I mean, I'm sure that the
that was
Middle
also
Eastern
my other
countries.
concern. Is that
Yeah,
if this partnership goes through, what's not to stop China, but trying to figure out ways just to be the leader in this partnership instead of we don't understand what's in the minds of the Chinese and Xi
yeah.
Jinping.
Well, also,
Xi
what
Jinping just wants control out of BRICS. He wants control out of the Belt and Road Initiative. I think maybe we can have the U.S. as like the balancing act and stopping China from trying to take over a partnership for Christ's sake. Like just
what's
every
yeah?
partnership they enter, they just want control.
What's the United States from doing the same thing too? I mean, that's
Mm,
that's the other issue. We don't know who the next president's going to be
yeah, that's fair.
because certain presidents are going to have certain views on China and agreements that should be like primarily in the U.S. dollar. So that's another thing. I think
So we just scrap the public sector from this and have this a private sector trilateral agreement. Have the
maybe
businesses and just
not a
have
bad
the
idea.
public sectors of each country kind of just as the mediators and facilitators of any diplomatic disputes that occur.
Could work. It could work,
It
but
could, but that's
it's
a big
tough.
if.
Yeah, these are all big ifs to be honest.
Yeah.
It's interesting because if the United States creates a free trade zone, and another thing I brought up, I kind of asked myself was we need to create security pacts because we don't have like security pacts with any of the countries, and that could be a good competition settler for the Chinese too. if we go up to the Saudis and them and be like, hey, we're gonna have an attack here, and when it attacks you or hurts you, we're here.
Right.
And so that could be pretty big because I mean most people wouldn't attack them because the United States is backing them. But the second thing, it shows China that the United States is not going anywhere, and that's one of the biggest things that I think we're always struggling to do is that like we kind of put ourselves in somewhere for a few years and then we kind of back off a little bit. And we put ourselves back in a few years and we back off a little bit so that everyone's like wary about like, oh, where they're going to be, are they going to be here? The one thing the Chinese do well
They
is
go in and they stay.
they're here, they're there to stay. And I think that's where the United States needs to kind of look at how they have a relationship with the country is when they make something, just create a pact and do it and stay. And if things change, you can just get rid of the pact,
Or
you know,
amend.
or amend it. So, yeah, that'd be a good start.
Yep. And then my next thing I wanted to talk about with this hypothetical partnership is who's going to be in charge of what. So essentially delegating the tasks in between this partnership. So when I was thinking is we have one section, one piece of this partnership be in charge of global energy. Another piece be
Um,
in part in charge of technological developments. One be in charge of, or are we going to have this partnership kind of just diversify and have these countries engage in whatever they want and they can trade amongst themselves, trade in this partnership, trade outwards as well. So that's what I was thinking
yeah,
is how would this partnership is it going to be a sort of a delegation type thing where you delegate different tasks to, or are they going to all three of these regions figure out like, all right, you're China, you're building this. The United States will offer you manufacturing parts, and Middle East will give you the energy you need to do that, and then we want a piece of whatever you sell out. So it goes deep, and I think I'm
yeah.
going way too deep for this right now. But
No, that's a good question because, well, I think I like the just openness of it. I think what they should do is just allow them to trade in whatever they want to create the competition. Because I mean, we all know that, I mean, in terms of manufacturing, China is the dominant one.
yeah,
In terms of technology, the United States is not the dominant one, but the best of the three. And in terms of energy, it's the Middle East. But you're gonna kind of offend, especially the Chinese, if offend Chinese if we're like taking over the technology sector and China's like, hey, we have perfectly good technology too. And the Middle East will probably get a little offended by it too. So I think just like creating an open and diverse competition between them to create and sell their own things, because then if each of them are contributing different technological advances, they can sell them to each other. If they're creating new energy advances, they can sell them to each other instead of them relying on the Saudis to just have energy and oil be exported and imported or create new types of energy technology. You can have everyone develop it. So it's not, you don't have to wait for the Saudis to finish something.
right.
You got something, we'll sell it. Or we'll trade with it or give it to you. Um, so maybe just more of an open agreement versus kind of giving them something to do. But it's kind
I
of
like
like,
that.
yeah, it's kind of like telling them like this is all you're good at, so do it. And
Yeah,
the Chinese might get mad.
they're like, don't offend us like that.
Yeah, like we know we're good at manufacturing, but we can do other things too.
Yep. And then another question is Israel, which is
Ooh,
which is an important piece of having this trilateral partnership.
totally forgot about
Your
Israel.
reaction was amazing.
Jesus.
So the final piece of the puzzle is Israel. And the issue with Israel is they are going to feel left out from all of this, and they're still as as far as small as they are, there are big security implications in the Middle East. And there's no way that this partnership will work unless the Israel Middle East question is solved first. Because it's gonna be like, okay, well now we have
That was a wrench.
yeah, that this is a wrench in the works. They're gonna be like, okay, now we have the Chinese here, we have the Americans here. What and we still have this issue with Palestine. How are we going to fix this? And well, we're like, oh well, we're not here for that. We're here for an economic partnership. Israel's gonna lose their mind. They're gonna be like, well, How could
How
the
can we
United
give up? Yeah.
yeah, how could the United States just leave us like that and work with our adversaries?
Well, the one thing about the current president in Israel is he's incredibly conservative and inward looking. The only thing he cares about is Iran, and Palestine. So maybe, hypothetically, if he's there for another 20 years, probably not going to happen. But if he's there for much longer, I mean, maybe he'll just ignore it. But that's a great point, like because they're
Here's my
close with
point.
Qatar and UAE, but that's it.
Here's my thing. And this is a personal thing that peace can be achieved through economic interdependence. When you have so much money on the table, and this is like one of the primary reasons the US and China are not at war over Taiwan right now. That's economic interdependence.
Yep, full world collapse if they
The
don't
world
fought.
would collapse. Two countries, even if they aren't a big part of the international community. One war is enough to take out two countries if you're that interdependent on each other.
Yep.
And this concept can be applied to the Israel question in the Middle East. When you have a trilateral free trade economic agreement between the United States, Middle Eastern countries, and China, Israel will have no choice but to find ways to make it work. Because they're going to miss out on opportunities if they're still inward looking. And they wouldn't want to risk the economic benefits.
I have an idea. Just came in my head. So the Chinese just wrote the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
Obviously, they're more close with Iran. What if Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar mediators in a deal with Israel and Iran? The United States is on Israel's side, Chinese with Iran. That's kind of like a representative and a back partner, and the Middle East mediates it because the Saudis genuinely don't care about the Israelis. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have embassies. They have embassies there, so that's great. So they already have kind of friends with Israel. I'm no, not friends, but diplomatic ties. So they mediate, and then Chinese is with Iran, and the Americans are with the Israelis. Something can get done. They just need to sit down. I think that would be. I think it could work. I was trying to mediate in my head.
Yeah,
I think it could work.
it can work if the United States and China are not the ones involved in the conversation.
Yes, they just have to be there. That's it. That's
They
it.
just have to be there in case things get heated. And
Yeah,
that's it. We don't have to do anything else. We need to let the Middle East decide them for themselves. Because I
because
feel like we're too trying to be into what's going on in the Middle East, if that makes sense.
yeah,
And I think we should just be there and have them discuss it the way they want it and on their terms instead of it being a US or Chinese based terms. So
trying to look up if
look up
yep,
what.
March 20. I don't know. The United States held a ceremony embassy in Jerusalem. I was trying to see if Tehran has a embassy in Jerusalem. Oh
I
no, the United
I
States
don't.
just moved its embassies from Tel Aviv. That's
Yeah.
right. I forgot this. They just
Yeah,
moved
yeah,
it from
they
Tel Aviv. So that would be so crucial, I think, to the conversation. Would be Tehran and Israel just putting an embassy in and saying
Oh,
we're gonna start
that would change the scope.
having diplomatic ties with each other, and we can discuss further things later. I think that should be the first thing on the table. That should be it. Just to walk in there and be like, "Hey, we're gonna put embassies in each of our," and they're like, "This is really difficult to do because they despise each other." If you want to hear more about that, watch our topic of the week: the Iran and uh,
Israel
Israeli
Iran
shadow war.
Shadow War.
Yep, great
Fantastic
episode.
episode.
Yeah, but they they're a very big conflict right now, and recently, I mean, with the drone strike of the facilities, the nuclear facilities, not good. But it's not out of the picture that Iran, since they're becoming more friendly, can maybe talk to the Israelis. And right now, they're really stuck in a conflict with the Palestinians and the Israelis. I don't know if anyone's seen the other day, but they had a ceasefire agreement and it was broken by Palestinian militants who shot and killed, I think, in strikes about 6 to 10 soldiers and civilians. So I think Iran can also be a mediator with the Palestinians too. That could be good. They could talk with the Palestinians and maybe
Yep.
think about just. I still am a big fan of the two-state solution, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
I think it is going to happen. A two-state solution, I think, is going to happen for
Maybe
sure.
one day, or
But
in the
yeah,
near
is it going to
future.
happen today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow? No.
No. I
But I think this will end in a two-state solution. That is
hope
my
so.
bet. I'm
Great.
I'm full bets on it. Like I will gladly take any bets with anyone.
Yeah, that'd be
And when it
great.
comes time, I'm collecting those bets.
Collecting that money, but yeah, Iran can. I think Iran needs to be the initiator too. Because if Israel's not gonna do it, if Iran went like kind of sent out a message and say, "Hey, we'd like to talk about putting an embassy," could calm things down for the Israelis
Yep.
significantly.
Yep. And I just want to end this off by saying what the final goals of this trilateral agreement is. It's purely, I don't think we make this clear. It's purely free trade.
Yep.
Zero tariffs. Just, if you need a material, I'm gonna send it to you. If you need something from me, I'm gonna send it to you. This creates a type of economic interdependence that will solidify global peace.
Yep.
It will solidify it. And you're asking why? Well, it's because if you have such three of the most influential regions working together, all the rest of the world wants a piece of it.
Yep.
People are not going to trust the BRICS. People are not going to trust NATO. There's too much division. People are
Yep.
not going to trust economic ties with the EU, even though they're a little more trustworthy.
Yeah.
We need a sort of agreement where it's an adversary on one side, an adversary on another side, and a neutral ground to be working together to show that this can be done and here are the benefits.
Absolutely. And that's where you can get, if that works, you can get the EU involved, you can get the African Union involved, you can get ASEAN involved, which that's a great point, actually. Now I'm thinking about it.
That, yeah, I was going to
Getting
get to
getting
there.
ASEAN involved would be, it'd be great. It'd be pretty nice.
I would love ASEAN to be a part of this, but of course we need the base, and eventually ASEAN would tap into it.
Yeah.
BRICS, if it becomes a thing, it'll tap into it.
Latin America. I mean,
Hmm.
the world is moving in a direction to where, unfortunately, because of the war in Russia and what's going on in Taiwan, that we're moving more towards independent economies, but security alliances. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just not technically a
It's not
good
where it's
thing.
supposed to be.
Yeah, we want to have both. We want to have security alliances, but we also want to have economic and free trade. Um, recently the United States and Japan and the Philippines are running trade exercises. They just had South Korea just had a talk.
Mhm.
I just visited the Japanese Prime Minister. Thank goodness. That's great. Great to
Didn't you call
hear.
that?
Yeah, I did.
I don't know which episode it was.
I told her,
You said
yeah,
something
they
about
they
it.
need to talk. I don't know what it was either, but they need
I
to.
know it was recent.
Yeah, they need to talk. Thank goodness they talked. They just sat down. And so this could be the right direction too. The war in Ukraine could also be the finally wake up call that we need to collaborate more. I mean, look at Europe. Europe is building up their military and collaborating much more with in between themselves, the United States, the African Union, for the most part, outside of the countries that abstained, are working together and helping out with Europe and the Ukrainians. Eastern Asia obviously is becoming much more friendlier, thank goodness. And so this could be the next step is getting the Middle East involved in all this and helping them expand their horizons. And I think that's exactly what the Saudis want to do. And if the Saudis can lead that, and with the previous episode we talked about Turkish elections, if the new Turkish president Kemal can work with the Saudis to do that, there's endless opportunities for the world to converge.
Yep.
So
Fantastic.
yeah,
I think I've exhausted everything.
yeah, I got nothing more.
You good?
Yeah,
All right, perfect. So that kind of wraps up this hypothetical episode on the possibility of a trilateral economic partnership between these three big regions. We ask you all to take a look at this possibility and to think about it. Of course, right now it's not possible, but it's something that could happen maybe in our lifetime, maybe in our next
our
generation.
children's lifetime, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
you never know.
maybe, yeah, we might be dead, Josh, before the day ends. But it doesn't hurt to think of what it can be because eventually, at some point in time, I strongly believe that we're going to have this one world idea. And we learned about this throughout this semester about the possibility of the
The
world
one world.
converging to one world with, of course, multiple cultures and all that. We're all not going to be
Just economies.
economies are going to
We don't
converge.
need one government.
We don't need one government. We don't need one culture. We need diversification, but there will be a time where economies will converge. So,
And we're moving on that path really, really quickly.
and something like this would be key for that happening.
Yep.
Would be the prime example of they did it. Why can't we do
Yep.
it?
There's a lot of key regions that we discussed over our time in the podcast, and I think the two that are the most important right now are Africa and the Middle East, because of just of how much influence they've had in recent years and what their populations are going to be in the future. And then I think the third one would be Latin America. Those are the ones that we need to focus on to help develop and turn this world into the utopia that we think it could be, because it can be. It really can be. We have what it takes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening in, everyone, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you.